Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 2 of the 1960 World Chess Championship match between Mikhail Tal and Mikhail Botvinnik. I do hope you enjoyed my coverage of game 1, even though the video was a bit lengthier than my usual videos, but it was the first game and I did have to say a few words about the match. This is the second game. Tal is already in the lead, and it's very interesting. Both Tal and Alexander Koblenz were trying to figure out what would Botvinnik do here. Would he still continue to play positionally and wait for Tal's mistake, or maybe he would try a bit more aggressive approach? For his opening with the white pieces, they knew that Botvinnik would either go for d4 or c4, as there were a few instances where Botvinnik actually opened the game with e4, but that was against weaker opponents that didn't really stand a chance against Botvinnik. So in this game, Botvinnik opened with d4, and Tal considered a lot of things, but one thing, as you can see the quote above the board, Tal saying Capablanca's lighter systems or other orthodox systems seem to have been forgotten in the archives of history. He says that d5, black can't really go for any advantage with the d5. So he goes for knight to c6, knight to f6, and going for the Indian game. We have c4 and now c5, the Benoni defense. Botvinnik opens with d5, we have e6 and knight to c3. E captures, c captures, and d6 now. Tal says that Spassky tried playing g6 in one of his games, and he did create a very nice victory, but that only works if white immediately goes for this maneuver knight f3, knight d2, knight c4, and tries to exploit this d6 weakness, but there is no d6 weakness just yet. But if you do go g6, then you have to be prepared for white pushing d6 himself. So Tal first plays d6, we have knight to f3 and now g6. Bishop to g5, and Tal knew that Botvinnik would go for this system. He wants to pin the knight, he wants this bishop to engage in the battle of the central squares, and now he will try to create a weakness out of this d6 pawn. Bishop to g7, knight to d2 now, h6, and h6, Tal goes immediately for the dark square bishop, because the dark square bishop is an incredibly powerful piece, and he wants to get rid of it. So bishop to h4, g5, bishop to g3, and now knight to h5, immediately going for the bishop. If you're a Benoni player or you play often against the Benoni, some players go a6 here, but now after a4, white is actually better here, because now after this knight to h5 move and knight to c4, now after captures and castles, after queen to b3, by playing a6, black extremely weakened this b6 square, and this will be much better for white. But even if black doesn't want to go for this immediate a6, white doesn't have to go a4. White can simply play e3, and this doesn't allow black to go knight to h5 for his dark square bishop. So if black first plays a6, then you can keep your dark square bishop. So that's why Tal immediately plays knight to h5, going for the bishop, and we have knight to c4. Bishop captures, h captures, and now Tal castles. Tal says an interesting idea to consider here is maybe capturing this knight. This is sometimes even possible, giving up your strong bishop. For example, b captures on c3, and now you push b5. Knight has to go back, and now a5. So you do give up your very strong dragon, but you have a very nice expansion here on the queen side. So for example, a4, b4, e4, b4, and now already black is threatening some ideas, but Tal figured that this isn't worthy of his dark square bishop. So after h captures on g3, Tal castled, and now we have e3. And e3, Tal really liked this e3 move. He thought it was a lot better than e4, leaves white with a lot more options. And one thing also you have to know, if you're a Benoni player, that white can't go for this d6 pawn immediately, because black can easily punish this with b5. After you capture the pawn, now f5. So attacking the knight that's defending the other knight, and after bishop captures on c8, now f captures on e4. And here white's idea of pushing d5 doesn't work. Now if you capture the knight, of course you get queen to d5, checking the king and winning the rook, but here black has queen a5 check, queen blocks, and then captures, and you lose a piece. So Botvinnik's idea of e3, Botvinnik's idea of e3 was a very nice move. Queen to e7 by Tal. We have bishop to e2 and rook to d8, getting additional protection for that d6 pawn. We have castles, and Tal didn't really expect Botvinnik to castle here, as he does have the open h file, so he could be able to use this, for example, for an attack. Maybe king to f1 was also an idea. But Botvinnik isn't interested in any complications, he just castles. Knight to d7, now a4, and here this a4, Tal doesn't really agree with this move. Tal says that e4 was a better idea here for white, because Tal's idea when he played knight to d7 was of course to go knight e5, exchange this knight, and then Tal will be left with the bishop pair, and both bishops have you know, bright futures. But now if Botvinnik played e4 instead of a4, now after knight to e5, Botvinnik doesn't have to exchange knights. He can go knight to e3 and keep the tension on the board. But Botvinnik wasn't interested in this. After knight d7, he played a4, and now Tal plays knight e5. Knight captures, queen captures, and here a5. So blocking Tal's expansion on the queen side. Rook to b8, and now Botvinnik plays rook to a2, and this rook to a2, although it's a really hard move to even consider, it's actually an excellent move. It protects the b2 pawn, as both the bishop and the queen are eyeing it. So now this knight can freely move, for example, to b5. That is definitely an excellent square. So bishop to d7. Now Tal stops, doesn't stop the knight, but gains some control of the b5 square. But he doesn't really like his queen on e5 and bishop on g7 battery, as now that the rook is on a2, it's pretty useless. So knight to b5 immediately by Botvinnik, attacking the a7 pawn. Bishop captures, and now b6. But after Botvinnik played bishop captures on b5, it was in this position on move 21 that Tal offered a draw, and Botvinnik responded, play your next move and then I will consider your draw offer. And had Tal continued with a6, Botvinnik would agree to a draw, because now after a6 and bishop moving back, b5 is coming, a captures, and now rook captures on b6. And you can't capture on a6 because black would simply capture on b2. So to protect the pawn, simply rook to a8, and it's it's not a drawn position. I mean, it can still be played, but Botvinnik said if a6 was played, he would agree to a draw. But after bishop to b5, Tal responded with b6, and here Botvinnik saw that he can keep the position closed and play his positional style game, and he refused the draw. And Tal, of course, understood why after Botvinnik pushed a6. So rook b to c8 by Tal, now queen to d3, and now rook to c7. Tal wants to at some point play rook to e7 to kind of prevent white from pushing e4 and f4, and he would definitely like to go rook f8 and push f5 at some point. So b3, not allowing Tal to expand with c4. Queen to c3, offering an exchange of queens. Queen captures, bishop captures, and white is controlling a lot more space here. Tal's rooks aren't getting active at any point soon, so best thing definitely Tal can hope for here is a draw, although even a win with white is hardly possible. But against such an endgame player like Botvinnik, you never know. Rook to c2, bishop back, and here Tal says that he was playing without any kind of a plan, that he was just, trying to play decent moves, but he thought immediately after playing bishop to f6 that bishop to g7 was better, kind of threatening pawn to f5 to prevent white from pushing e4 or g4, but he went bishop to f6, and here g4 immediately by Botvinnik. Rook to e7, now rook to c4, rook back to c8, now g3. Tal doesn't really have any moves here, he can just wait and see what Botvinnik will do. Bishop to g7, rook to d1, rook to f8, and now rook to d3. And here Tal finds a very interesting maneuver that will allow him to activate his rooks. He plays king to h7, king to g2, and now king to g6. So now he brought his king into the game and he's preparing h5 and f5. Rook to d1. Now Tal plays h5, king, pawn captures and king captures. And now that Tal managed to break this king side kind of open, now he can use his rooks on the h file, and he does have some chances here. So g4, this comes with check, and Tal says he wasn't very impressed by this move as it only brings his king to a more active square. The king is not really doing anything on h5, but Botvinnik just wanted to prevent Tal from pushing f5. Tal considered a move like b4 to offer white more chances. But okay, g4 check, king g6, now rook back to c2, rook to h8, and bishop to d3 check. King to f6, and this was move 37. Again, Tal didn't consider this check to do anything specifically for white, as again the king is much more active on f6. Maybe he can even come to e5. King to g3, now rook e to e8, bishop to b5 attacking the rook, and now rook to e4. Rook to c4, rook captures, b captures on c4, and now king to e7. Bishop to a4, now bishop to e5 check, king to f3, we have rook to h4, and now rook to g1. And here Tal pushed f5. So this is the final move of the game. This is move 44, and it was in this position that Botvinnik suggested that they should draw this game, and Tal agreed, because now there's simply too much simplifications, and there's no point in continuing to play this game. Botvinnik can simply ignore this and play bishop to c2, and the game goes on. But even he can capture on f5, because after g captures on f5 and rook captures on c4, Botvinnik has this rook to g4, and now Tal would have to exchange this rook, or he loses the g5 pawn. So either by capturing or perhaps by going rook b4, whichever Tal chose, it would be an opposite color bishop endgame, which neither of them wanted to play. So yeah, that's game number 2 of the 1960 World Chess Championship match, Tal versus Botvinnik. It's not like it wasn't like extremely exciting, but I did enjoy a lot of ideas that Tal showed in the Benoni. So if you're a Benoni player, I guess you could find this kind of useful. And of course, I did say I would cover all games, so I do hope you enjoyed it. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with game 3 of the match. Thank you all. See you soon.